The darkness over the abandoned iron bridge seemed thicker than the surrounding night, an inky black that swallowed the beam of my flashlight. The structure loomed before me, a decrepit relic of the 19th century, its metal frame oxidized and forgotten on this disused rural road in Minas Gerais. I've explored countless abandoned places across Brazil, but something about this site made my skin prickle even before I stepped onto its weathered planks. The midnight air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and corroded metal, an olfactory warning I should have heeded. My footsteps echoed hollowly as I began my crossing, camera hanging heavy around my neck. Each plank creaked a protest beneath my weight, the sound unnaturally amplified in the silent countryside. I'd researched this bridge thoroughly before my midnight excursion, built in 1887, abandoned in 1964, subject of local legends about disappeared travelers. Just another forgotten monument to document for my urban exploration blog. 20 paces in, I heard it, faint but unmistakable. A melody, distant and wavering, seeping through the night like mist. The notes seemed to emanate from somewhere beneath the bridge. A slow, melancholy tune played on what sounded like an old violin, or perhaps a music box. I stopped, held my breath, and listened. The song was oddly familiar yet impossible to place, a haunting refrain that stirred something primal in my memory. I reasoned it must be coming from a nearby farm, though I'd seen no lights in any direction for miles. Perhaps a radio left on in a maintenance shed I hadn't noticed. The rational explanations multiplied as I continued forward, but died in my mind as the melody grew progressively louder with each step I took toward the center of the bridge. The sound quality shifted subtly, clearer now, more present. No longer could I pretend it came from some distant source. It surrounded me, vibrating through the metal beneath my feet, filling the air with its eerie cadence. My heart began to hammer against my ribs as I realized the music wasn't just getting louder, it was getting closer. I switched off my flashlight, hoping to better locate the source in the darkness. Moonlight filtered through breaks in the clouds, casting long shadows across the rusted girders. The silver light revealed nothing but emptiness, stretching before and behind me. Yet the melody continued, now loud enough that I could distinguish individual notes. A repeating pattern that seemed to loop every 30 seconds before adding new, discordant tones that sent shivers crawling up my spine. At the exact center of the bridge, the music stopped. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the melody had been. My ears strained in the vacuum left behind, picking up only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant rustling of leaves. Then came a new sound, sharp, deliberate, unmistakable. Footsteps, metallic footsteps, ringing out from directly beneath me. They moved with measured precision, a slow, mechanical cadence that echoed the rhythm of the vanished melody. My mouth went dry, my palms slick with sweat. I fumbled to switch my flashlight back on, but my trembling fingers dropped it, sending it clattering across the wooden planks. I didn't wait to retrieve it. I turned and ran, my legs suddenly leaden, uncooperative. The bridge seemed to have stretched impossibly long. My lungs burned as I gasped for air, the sound of those footsteps now changing tempo, quickening to match my panicked pace. Over my shoulder, I glimpsed movement, shapeless, shifting shadows crawling along the bridge's frame. Not human silhouettes, but something else. Formless masses that seemed to flow like liquid across the metal beams, converging toward the spot where I had stood. I reached the end of the bridge, my ankle twisting painfully as I stumbled onto solid ground. Still, I didn't stop. I limped through the darkness toward where I'd parked my car, a quarter mile down the old access road. the weight of watching eyes pressed against my back. Several times I nearly fell, disoriented by the perfect blackness of the rural night and the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My car appeared in the distance, a sanctuary of modern steel and glass. With fumbling hands, I unlocked it and threw myself inside, locking the doors and starting the engine in one frantic motion. The headlights illuminated nothing but empty road and the distant skeletal silhouette of the bridge. As my breathing slowly calmed, I convinced myself I had experienced some sort of auditory hallucination, perhaps triggered by the legends I'd read about the place, or simple exhaustion from my week-long exploration trip. I reached for my water bottle, trying to steady my still trembling hands. That's when the melody returned. Not distant now, but immediate, crystal clear as if played directly beside my ear. The same haunting refrain, but with new undertones that scraped against my sanity. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. The side mirrors showed nothing but darkness. Yet the music continued, filling the car's interior, impossibly loud now. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it made no difference. The melody seemed to bypass my senses entirely, playing directly inside my head. With shaking fingers, I jammed the car into gear and sped away, tires throwing gravel. The melody remained perfectly constant, neither fading nor intensifying as the distance between me and the bridge grew. 10 miles later, I pulled into a gas station, the only lit place I could find in this rural darkness. The music stopped the instant I stepped out of the car. I grabbed my phone, intending to call someone, anyone, but paused when I saw a notification. An audio recording had been saved to my cloud drive. I never recall making one. With a sense of deepening dread, I pressed play, already knowing what I would hear. The melody poured from my phone's speakers, identical to what I'd heard on the bridge. But in the recording, beneath the music, a voice whispers my name. My full name, which I had never shared on any of my exploration posts. The voice whispers something else too, something I still can't bring myself to repeat. But I know with absolute certainty that no matter how far I drive, no matter where I go, I'll hear that melody again. And next time, whatever lurks on that abandoned bridge won't be content to remain behind. My phone pings with another notification. Another audio file has been uploaded to my cloud. It's playing now as I write this. The melody is changing, evolving, and footsteps approach. The creaking came from above, faint but unmistakable, like hesitant footsteps testing the floorboards. I froze, my coffee mug suspended halfway to my lips, ears straining against the pre-dawn silence. No one should be up there. No one could be up there. Laura had been gone for 3 days, visiting her mother in Porto Alegre, and I had triple-checked every lock before going to bed. Yet the sound persisted, a deliberate, measured cadence that couldn't be dismissed as settling wood or nocturnal wildlife. I'd never liked this house. When Laura fell in love with the old 2-story colonial in the quiet outskirts of Gramado, I had smiled and nodded, suppressing my unease about its age, its history, its peculiar angles and shadows. The previous owners had been vague about why they were selling so cheaply, mentioning only lifestyle changes with averted eyes. Laura saw charm in the weathered wood and antique fixtures. I saw only darkness pooling in corners that shouldn't exist. The attic had always been the worst part. A narrow, retractable ladder in the upstairs hallway led to a space I'd visited only once during inspection, finding nothing but dust, cobwebs, and an inexplicable chill that persisted despite the summer heat outside. We'd agreed to use it for storage eventually, but neither of us had ventured up there since moving in 3 weeks ago. Until now, apparently, because someone, or something, was definitely moving above me. I set my mug down with a hand that wasn't quite steady, the ceramic clinking loudly against the wooden table. The sound above paused, as if listening. My throat constricted, a bead of cold sweat trickling down my spine as I realized whatever was up there had just reacted to me. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and navigated to Laura's number, but stopped before calling. What would I say? That I was hearing noises? She already thought I was being dramatic about the house. The police would be equally dismissive. A grown man spooked by an old house settling. I needed proof first. The harsh fluorescent lights of the kitchen suddenly seemed feeble against the darkness pressing in from the windows. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the drawer, solid aluminum, useful for illumination and, if necessary, protection. My heart hammered against my ribs as I made my way to the staircase, each creak of the steps beneath my feet echoing the sounds from above. The second-floor hallway stretched before me, the attic entrance at its far end. My breath came in shallow gasps, mouth dry as paper. The trapdoor to the attic, which should have been flush with the ceiling, was open by several inches, the retractable ladder partially extended, as if someone had begun to descend and then retreated. I whispered Laura's name, though I knew she wasn't home. The sound died in the hallway's stillness. My rational mind suggested a draft might have loosened the mechanism, but my instincts screamed otherwise. For 2 hours, I sat at the bottom of the hallway stairs, flashlight clutched in white-knuckled hands, watching the attic entrance. Nothing emerged. Eventually, dawn's gray light filtered through the windows, and exhaustion overcame terror. I sealed the attic shut with duct tape across the seams of the trapdoor, called in sick to work, and collapsed into uneasy sleep. When I awoke that afternoon, the tape was intact, and I nearly convinced myself I'd imagined everything, until I noticed the fine layer of dust on the hallway floor, marked with what looked like barefoot prints too small to be mine, leading from the attic door to our bedroom and back. I photographed the prints before cleaning them away, then spent hours inspecting every inch of the attic entrance, finding no way it could have opened from within. Online research into the house's history revealed nothing unusual, no tragic deaths, no mysterious disappearances, nothing to explain what was happening. That night, I locked myself in the guest bedroom, a chair propped under the doorknob. Sleep came in fitful bursts, shattered near 3 a.m. by a sound that sent electricity surging through my veins. My name, whispered just outside the door, in a voice almost, but not quite, like Laura's. "Carlos." It came again, slightly elongated, as if spoken underwater. "Why are you hiding from me?" My lungs seized, unable to draw breath. The doorknob turned slowly, testing against the lock. The chair legs scraped slightly against the floor, as something pressed against the door. I bit down on my fist to keep from screaming, tasting blood. When morning finally came, I called Laura, trying to keep my voice steady. She confirmed she was still at her mother's, returning tomorrow as planned. She asked if everything was all right. I lied. I couldn't leave. What would I tell her? That I'd abandoned our new home because of noises? That I'd lost my mind after 3 nights alone? Instead, I set up my laptop to record the hallway and attic entrance, determined to capture evidence. The camera failed at 2:47 a.m. The timestamp on the footage showed nothing unusual before the screen went black. But I didn't need the recording to know something had happened, because I was already awake. jolted from sleep by the unmistakable sound of the attic ladder extending fully to the floor. Heavy footsteps crossed the hallway, not the tentative steps from before, but confident, deliberate. They stopped outside my door. "Carlos," came the whisper, Laura's voice distorted like a warped record. "I've been watching you from the darkness. For so long now." The doorknob turned. The chair shuddered. My heart threatened to burst from my chest. "We need to talk about Laura," the voice continued, dropping an octave, sounding less like my wife with each word. "About what she found in the attic before she left. About why she's not really visiting her mother." My phone lit up beside me. A text message from an unknown number containing only an image. The attic, our attic, where a small door I'd never noticed stood open in the far wall, revealing nothing but impenetrable darkness beyond. Another text followed. She found it too. She looked inside. "Do you want to know what she saw?" The chair suddenly slid across the floor as if pulled by unseen hands. The door remained closed, but somehow, impossibly, I felt breath on my neck, cold and ancient. "She saw me," the voice whispered directly into my ear. "And now I see you." When Laura returned the next day, she found me sitting catatonic in the kitchen, surrounded by dozens of printed photographs of the attic, all showing nothing but empty space, no door, no evidence of what I'd experienced. I couldn't explain my state, couldn't form words to describe the terror. The doctors called it acute stress disorder. Laura was understanding, but concerned, suggesting we could sell the house if it would help. But as she spoke, I noticed something I hadn't before, a slight change in her voice, a subtle difference in her eyes. And when she thought I wasn't looking, I caught her glancing toward the ceiling, toward the attic, with something like recognition. We still live in the house. I've sealed off the attic permanently, or so I tell myself. But sometimes at night, I hear the ladder extending, and sometimes, when Laura sleeps beside me, I see her lips move in silent conversation with the darkness. And I wonder, what came back with her? What watches me through her eyes? The darkness in this place isn't like regular darkness. It's alive, thick as oil, crawling with the whispers of forgotten things. The São Paulo Historical Museum after midnight isn't just empty, it's waiting. I should have known better when I took this job. The pay seemed decent for a night shift, perfect for a broke anthropology student. But no amount of money is worth what I've experienced in these endless halls. My name is Rafael Suarez, and I'm not sure how much longer I can remain the night watchman here. The first week was uneventful, boring even. I'd patrol the marble halls with their high ceilings and grand archways, flashlight beam dancing across glass display cases. The building had been a grand estate in the 1800s before becoming a museum, and its architecture, ornate wooden doors, creaking floorboards, and elaborate moldings felt frozen in time. My footsteps echoed through the silence, my only company. I'd check the security monitors, make my rounds, read textbooks, repeat. Easy money. The isolation didn't bother me. I welcomed the quiet time to study. The museum director had warned about the building settling, about the old pipes and electrical system causing strange noises. Nothing to worry about, he'd assured me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. By the third week, I noticed things. Small things at first. A display case that I swore I'd locked was slightly ajar. The temperature dropping inexplicably in certain rooms. The feeling of being watched when I turned my back to the colonial exhibits. I chalked it up to exhaustion, to the 3 a.m. delirium that comes with overnight shifts. Then I saw her, It was a flash at first, a swirl of fabric disappearing around a corner. My heart lurched into my throat as I sprinted after it, sure I'd caught an intruder. But the hallway was empty, the alarm system untriggered. I doubled the frequency of my rounds that night, checking every shadow. The security cameras captured it next. I was scanning the feeds in the cramped security office when movement caught my eye. In the Portuguese artifacts room, a woman in a high-necked ivory dress glided between display cases. The video quality was poor, but I could make out her silhouette clearly. The cinched waist, the full skirt, the rigid posture of Victorian-era nobility. Before I could radio for backup, she turned toward the camera. Where her face should have been, there was only a blurred oval, like someone had smudged away her features. Then the feed flickered, and she vanished. My skin prickled with goose flesh. My mouth went bone dry. I pulled up the recorded footage, but there was nothing, just an empty room and the timestamp ticking forward. The museum curator had mentioned no ghost stories when I was hired. When I casually inquired the next day about previous occupants of the building, he mentioned only that the original owner had been a coffee baron whose wife had died under unfortunate circumstances. He changed the subject quickly. The third month brought escalation. The sounds began, whispers in Portuguese too faint to decipher, the rustle of heavy fabric, the distinctive click of heeled boots on hardwood. I'd spin around, heart hammering against my ribs, sweat beading on my forehead, only to find emptiness behind me. Sleep became impossible, even during daylight hours. My professors noticed my declining performance, the dark circles beneath my bloodshot eyes. I considered quitting, but some morbid curiosity kept me returning night after night. What did she want? Why could I see her when others apparently couldn't? Last night, everything changed. I was making my usual rounds through the east wing when the air grew suddenly frigid. My breath clouded before me as the hallway lights flickered and dimmed. The familiar sensation of being observed intensified until my neck burned with it. I turned slowly, every muscle tensed, my hand clutching the flashlight so tightly, my knuckles whitened. She stood at the end of the corridor, more substantial than I'd ever seen her. The details were crisp now. The ivory dress yellowed with age, the high collar, the elaborate arrangement of dark hair. She remained faceless, but somehow I knew she was looking directly at me. My legs trembled as panic flooded my system. Fight or flight hammered in my brain, but I could do neither. She raised one pale hand and beckoned. Against every instinct I followed. She led me through a series of rooms I'd patrolled hundreds of times, finally stopping before a large gilt-framed mirror in the East Gallery. 19th century, according to its placard, imported from Portugal by the original estate owner. The glass reflected nothing but the empty room behind me. The woman approached the mirror and pressed her palm against its surface. The glass rippled like disturbed water. She turned to me again, that blank face somehow conveying expectation. My body moved of its own accord. I approached the mirror, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. When I was beside her, she pointed to the lower corner of the ornate frame. With trembling fingers, I ran my hand along the carved wood and felt it, a small, hidden latch. The mirror swung outward like a door, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. Cold air rushed from the opening, carrying the unmistakable smell of old death and secrets long buried. My flashlight beam penetrated only a few feet into the darkness before being swallowed completely. From within came the faint sound of a woman weeping. She glided into the passage and turned, waiting for me to follow. I stand here now, at the threshold, pen shaking as I write this account in my security log. I don't know what waits in that hidden space. I don't know if I'll return from it. But I know with grim certainty that if I don't follow her tonight, she'll never leave me in peace. The weeping grows louder. My watch reads 3:33 a.m. I'm going in.